Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com, the program called What's Going On, and I want to also welcome over there at 92.1 WFOV. And we are coming together for another edition of the program, and we are so glad to have you with us. We are going to talk about the aftermath of the Super Bowl game. That's not our main talk. We're going to be talking about the aftermath of the failure to have witnesses called before the Senate. We're going to talk about that and give you the constitutional grounding points of that. But I do want to talk, first of all, about something else that has to do with this tremendous loss we suffered in this country from a person who was outstanding as a family man, and that's Kobe Bryant. And I wish people would stop talking about how many points he hit and what kind of a basketball player he was, because that demeans a man who was a great family man, and that's what I will always remember him for, and what I miss most about him was the example he set, how great he was with his daughters. And I recall when he was retiring from, I think at the age of 38, he was retiring from basketball. He had started playing in the NBA at 17, and he never went to college out of high school to get into the NBA. But he was so good in high school that he was able to jump over the college training ground. That's what really colleges are right now. They are training grounds for football teams and basketball teams. And Kobe was able to skip over that because they saw the talent this person had in high school. And they knew that even at age 17, although there would be a maturity factor, there was no problem as far as a talent level that he brought into the NBA. Everybody's talking about that aspect because he was a great basketball player. I think at this point, the fourth most prolific basketball players in NBA history, LeBron just passed him. The day, as a matter of fact, the irony of his death was that LeBron James passed him on the day that Kobe Bryant made his transition. I mean, the ultimate transition. And he's now the fourth highest scoring basketball player in NBA history. And he was, in fact, great. But if you have seen this man with his children, his daughters, you can understand the reductionism that's taking place when you reduce this man, as great as he was in his family life, to a basketball player. Kobe should be remembered, and the loss that we should feel is because at a time when you have so many fathers, I'm talking about fathers more or less in the black community, but really fathers in general in the country, the percentage of fathers leaving the homes now are not even starting families now. Today is what it was in '65 when Moynihan was talking about the problems of in the black family, when he was talking about the problems that we now were seeing being incubated in the black community, that if he was not arrested, then we would have the problem that would become geometrically worse, and we have seen it getting worse. What we have now is 3 times the percentage of fathers that are absent from their children today than it was in 1965 when the Moynihan report came out. And then, of course, he had suggested the solution to it. Nobody wanted to hear, because he was suggesting, in his own words, more personal responsibility. He didn't say personal responsibility. He was talking about benign neglect, meaning that the government needs to get out of the way in a benevolent way, not because it was trying to be hard on the ones who were acting responsibly, but not picking up the slack that had been laid down by those absent fathers. And they were saying the government ought to practice benign neglect. And that would, in fact, force greater responsibility, because there's not going to be the backup plan and this support system put in place by the government. And everybody was talking about how Moynihan was, in fact, being, of course, they always want to reach for the race card. I mean, that always works. And so Monahan is now a racist because he's suggesting that the government practice benign neglect, but the racists were ones that were making the accusation, and we now see all these years later from 1965 to the present time who was right and who was wrong, and Monahan was making a very good point, as history has proven that to be the case. And he was saying what we now are saying, we're not using the same words. It's not benign neglect, it's not neglect at all. It's the demand that fathers do something similar to what we see was going on in Kobe Bryant's household, and Kobe Bryant was an excellent father, and that's what we should be talking about right now. The loss to that family and the role model that the country lost, in particular the black community lost, in terms of someone setting an example of how fathers ought to be with their children. I don't like the politics of Stephen Curry, but I would say this, that Stephen Curry impressed me with his daughter. He'd be at the microphone and he'd have his daughter in his lap. This is the younger daughter. This is something like 3 years ago when they won the championship. And his daughter would be at the microphone and she's putting her hands over his mouth and telling him to be quiet. She thought he was talking too much. And you could tell the relationship they had, the bonding they had. And she'd go and play with the curtains, and that would be a certain way she would occupy her time and let out some of the energy and so on. But he always had his daughter at the press conferences. And we had gotten so used to her being around that when they won the championship, and this lady announcer was interviewing him as a star of the game and of the star of the series, and he had his daughter's arm. He put his daughter down, and the interviewer said, "No, bring Rachel." Her name was Rachel. Bring Rachel up here, and she wandered off by that time. But we gotten so used to seeing his daughter and how he was with his daughter, that we really look forward to him being interviewed because we want to see how he would interact with the daughter. And that's really what's important. How these people that have the means and can take care of their children, how are they with the children who they have the means to take care of? And if you don't have the means to take care of your children, you should be bringing them into the world, because it's your responsibility. When I hear people talking about, I take care of my daughter, I'm just like Chris Rock. That's what you're supposed to do. I don't understand why someone would be bragging about what is a familiar responsibility. You're supposed to take care of your children, but it's so remiss in the community today that people are bragging about doing something because it's the exception to the rule rather than the rule itself.
I love that thing with Chris Rock. He used to do that. Well, you're supposed to take care of your kids.
You're supposed to take care of your children.
Yeah.
What do you brag? Come here. Come close. Pow! Give you a pimp slap.
It's like, what do you want for a medal? What do you want, a medal? I mean, another thing is, I had a more liberal friend at U of M. We argued that one time because I was talking about that that whole stand-up routine, and he goes, "Well, I think they should because it shows effort." I went, and this guy was a stellar individual. He raised his own kids and everything, and then he was very involved as a dad. He still is, And I said, well, do you have to have like your accolades and people's praise? And he kind of thought, he goes, well, but I always expected that part of it. It's supposed to be what I was expected of me. And I went, duh. That's they keep on going back to like it takes a village. Hillary Clinton picked up on that. This isn't a village, okay? You got expressways going through.
Your village is your house.
That analogy doesn't work.
Takes a village to raise a child, and that village starts right there in that home.
And if people advocate for that, if they had children and they caught you disciplining them or yelling at them, they'd go off on you and try to kill you if you do that. So guess what? In a village, if you always want to use the analogy of a village, well, gee, that over there, somebody would have chastised their kid, and they probably wouldn't have been frowned upon or had people going after them for chastising the children because they realized there was a bigger thing at stake there for the village. We're not a village. We are not a global village. We are not. We're cities. And guess what? I'm glad when people are largely indifferent to me through the day-to-day operation of my life.
If you say that it takes a village to raise a child, John. That's an announcement right there of an abdication of responsibility because we didn't say the village, it takes a village to raise a child. It was the household raising a child, and each household was doing the same thing that was being done in my household, and it may have looked like the village was doing it, but my parents were doing the job in the household, and then every household in the neighborhood was doing their job, and therefore the children being held in check in that household were I was playing with their children, and therefore the rules that applied in that household were the rules that applied in the household where I was from. When they came over to my house, the same rules. And that's what they're saying in the village, was each family playing its own role in its own space. And collectively, that space was geometrically the whole community, and that's what we had going on as far as raising children. But it was my parents' responsibility. My mom was responsible in my household. My dad was absent. But my mom was, and I didn't have a sense of loss in that regard, because my mom was such a force in my life, and that was the village that I was in, the village my mom had within those walls that she had constructed as a habitat we were in. And we had 5 children, and I didn't understand a lot of it at that time. But when I finally got married and I had a family, I got into a ready-made family. My wife had 3 children, and when I got into this ready-made family, that's when I began to understand my mother a lot more, because, and I will never forget it, the first meal we had at the table, the 3 children, the youngest was 10, the oldest was 13, and the chicken was, I felt just like Andy Griffin's show when they were sitting at the table eating, and they had this one guy from the mountains, and all the potatoes were passed out, and got around to him, and all the potatoes were gone. He said, "Potatoes!" He's calling for A and B to bring the potatoes. Then they pass around the bread and get around to him, and all the bread's gone. He said, "Bread!" Well, I didn't know until I got married that my mother was sacrificing, because we would always ask when we would have dinner, we'd say, "Mom, you want any?" And she would always say no. So as a child, I'm thinking, well, when you get to be older, you're not hungry. You don't have an urge to participate at the dinner table and eat. Because my mom would always say no. I didn't know she was sacrificing, but I knew this when I was sitting at the table and they were all grabbing the chicken out of that basket and got around to me and there's a wing in there. I didn't think that was acceptable, because I was the one out there. That's when I realized. That's when I began to say, I never forget, I was at that table and I sat back and I said, wow. Now this is years and years and years. My mom passed April the 12th, 1980. My mom made a transition April the 12th, 1980. And it wasn't until that moment, and this was, let's see, I was 37 at that time. I'm not gonna tell you what year it was, because y'all trying to get in my business. but I sat back at the table. I'll never forget it. I sat back at the table, and I was saying, "Wow," because that's when I understood that sacrifice. And what's that basketball player's name? There was the most valuable player on Golden State's team when they won the championship. He had come from another team, and he was the most valuable player. The 7'1" guy. I don't know the players too well. I don't watch a lot of this sports stuff. But he won the most valuable player award, and they had his mother on Good Morning America. And they were talking about how she would not eat until her children had eaten. And I was glad that now he is paying her back. That's how you do it. You pay your dues when you're able to do so. And he was and they were talking about how she would not eat if her children have a larger portion of the food. To me, that was par for the course. That's what parents did. That's what I know. It's what moms did. I don't know if the dads are sitting there and didn't want, as Chris Rock said, that big piece of chicken, but I know what my mom did, and I saw that in the community when I was coming up, and I really appreciate that. And that's why I think we're missing something with Kobe. I think that we ought to be talking about the kind of father that Kobe was. Put that in the front, on the front burner, and all the other stuff that's meandering, not primary stuff, but really peripheral to this man's importance. This man was important because he genuinely was as he said himself, he was a girl's dad. He mentioned that. And those basketball players talking about, they had a tribute yesterday during this all day leading up to the football game, because Super Bowl has become the biggest sporting event in the world right now. The single. Can I say that in terms of the World Cup? Well, I think the World Cup is maybe the World Cup would be a bigger event as far as people watching the World Cup. But apart from that, the Super Bowl is the biggest event. And they were doing a tribute to Kobe at different times leading up to the game. And even during the game, they were doing some things with number 24. One of the things that they did was they had a countdown from 24, and then each second was an acknowledgement of the uniform that Kobe Bryant wore. And that's fine, and we should, in fact, acknowledge that. But that's more peripheral. They have made it the centerpiece of the man's life, and that's really peripheral. We know him because he played basketball, but because we know him as a father of 4 girls, then the basketball is how we know him, but the importance of the man is not the basketball. His importance will be long-standing because this person that we lost in one of the most freakish accidents that's imaginable and very hard to take, because you know when you get sick, you're able to allow for disease has a place in our lives. What it does is that it allows you to make the release. Nature gives you time to get used to the idea that termination is on the horizon, and it will not be. The mortality is not as long as it would be if the sickness had not occurred. The dis-ease is not just so the person is sick. The dis-ease is also the one that's watching the sickness. And I can speak from my own standpoint, because my mom was in the hospital, and I know that when the moment finally came, I was really, as close as I was to my mom, I was relieved in a sense that the suffering had ended. It wasn't an abrupt thing as it was with Kobe Bryant. And I don't want to be on this the whole time we're talking. I'm just simply trying to lay a foundation for how we ought to see these great people who are great because we know them as these public figures, but we need to look beyond that, through which we got to know them, and look at what their life was, commemoratively speaking, in other regards to how we know them. We have taken how we know them and made that the centerpiece. The question is, by knowing them, what we knew about them in terms of that which is really consequential. And Kobe's life is that he was, as he said himself, a girl's dad. And I want you to look at that basketball court. When Kobe was retiring at 38, which means he had been in the league for 21 years, starting at age 17. And Kobe at the microphone on the basketball court wasn't talking about basketball. He's over there talking to his family. I mean, he wasn't over there with them. He's on the basketball court, but they're on the sideline. And Kobe was saying this. It's one of the most beautiful tributes he could have. It's one of the most beautiful endings he could have had to a great career. But what he's saying at the end of his career is what's really great about him. And he said that he was talking to his children about how he had become the person he was on the basketball court. He wasn't talking about basketball. He was talking about his character. And he said, if you get up and you are doing so when you don't want to get up out of the bed and you don't want to go and practice and you don't want to make the sacrifice and you do it anyway. And if you do that when you don't want to do it because you aspire to be the best you can be, you say, then I know that I've done my job as a dad. And that's what makes this man memorable. It was just basketball. I mean, I know he hit 81 points in one of the best games he had. And it wasn't the last game he played where they were feeding him the ball because they wanted him to have a lot of points the last game he played in the NBA. That's not his best game. The best game he had was the one where he hit 81 points. But you know, Wilt Chamberlain hit 100 points in a game, and nobody talks about him because of Wilt Chamberlain writing that meandering nonsense that's not consequential in those books he wrote, one of which is Wilt, just like any other 7-foot millionaire next door. And he's talking about how many person he ran through during his lifetime. And he had all these notches on his bedpost and all that. That doesn't live anywhere. And nobody's going to remember that. And then some of those persons tried to duplicate that nonsense in the NBA, and they said that what Wilt Chamberlain was talking about is nonsense. Because they were trying to, they were doing the same stuff that's non-consequential as Wilt Chamberlain was doing. But nobody recalls that. Wilt Chamberlain never got married. And he never did have the responsibility of getting involved in the family. And nobody memorialized him as a basketball player, as a matter of fact. They ain't even talking about that. He was one of the great players of all time, because he was the only one out there that's 7 feet plus during his era. A lot of players now 7-foot players, and I don't know if he would be as great now with players as tall as he is. And Jim Brown, you were on the field yesterday. I don't know if you would be as great in this time period when you got a person on the line that's bigger than you were, but you were the biggest one out there in the time that you played. And that you'll be a different player in the day's game. But I do respect those persons who have that special talent. But I look at the totality of their life. Let me tell you one other thing, then I get off this point. I was pulling for the team that won. I wasn't pulling for them at first, but I changed my mind after I saw a black player by the name of Clark. I don't know him personally. I didn't know he was on the team. I found out later that he played for the University of Michigan. That's a plus. I don't know if it's a plus if I go through or higher. But that was good. And I found that out later. That wasn't why I admired him, but I saw that during the press conference leading up to the game, days before the game, he went to the press conference as wearing, this is a black football player. I think he was playing on defense, maybe the safety position or something. And he had a Donald Trump shirt admonishing the prominence of Kanye West's acknowledgement of Trump and Trump's contributions to the black community, although you would not know it by the kind of rhetoric you're getting from these people who fear that by Trump doing the things he's doing for the black community, that it leads some people off that plantation, and the political power base that's inside the Democratic Party, that is a power base they bring to the that is in fact grounded upon the allegiance of blacks to the Democratic Party. I mean, the whole black caucus in Congress is a Democratic. I don't even know why they call it Congressional Black Caucus. They all call it the Congressional Democratic Caucus, the Congressional Black Democratic Caucus, or maybe what Rush Limbaugh calls it, which is the Black Caucasian Caucus, which is another name for it. Or that book put out by Nathan Hare, whose wife, you probably know her more than you know him. Nathan Hare has kind of gone into the background, but you may know Julia Hare, who's written the books about the family and so on. And Nathan Hare had a book out called The Black Saxons. Not the Black Anglo-Saxon, but the Black Saxons, which is a very good book about that group. Or E. Franklin Frazier's book, right? The one that was over the sociology department at Howard University, the book called The Black Bourgeoisie, meaning the black middle class. And they're afraid, quite frankly, that if Trump resonates in the black community, what's going to happen, and he is resonating in the black community a lot more than any of the others were, and what they're afraid of is that he's going to lead these blacks off the Democratic Party's plantation, like in the city of Flint that I'm living in, and that's going to be a problem in terms of the power base. The people like Maxine Waters, who doesn't even live in the district where of course, that she claimed to be representing, she doesn't even live in the same district. She's living on the side of the district, and that. Well, I'm just told by the technicians here at the studio, they just told me that WFOV is taking a break. Thank you, Paul, for staying tuned. I know you're watching the program, and you'll be back in another 4 minutes over there at WFOV 92.1. And we will, of course, see you on the other side of the break. Do you know that nothing stops the show here, and we just continue to roll on and roll over the opposition? A lot of it out there. We have a lot of opposition out there. You know, we hold our friends close, and we hold our enemies even closer, where we can watch them. Because they're out there, right? And you know, people watch. It's like, you know, Facebook. You know, when I'm typing my articles on Facebook, I can tell when the Facebook censors are watching my site, because I'm typing at this rate of speed to get the articles up. It takes me about an hour to do that. We got to go back over it and make sure that some words, I's and L look the same way. You have to go back and see if you spell the words correctly, because I do not like to represent Mrs. Reed, my English teacher in high school, 12th grade high school teacher. I have to represent Mrs. Reed, who taught me, I think I can give her credit, who taught me to write a decent sentence. And I write in her name, so I have to make sure I'm representing. So it takes about an hour to put the articles up and so on and so forth. But I'm typing at the rate of speed. And all of a sudden, I see somebody come on my site. I don't see them, but I see them taking over the site. Because I'm typing my article, I'm just as busy as a bee. And then I'm typing at this rate of speed, and there's somebody, and here's the site. And the letters are going up on the screen like this. I'm in the next paragraph, and here I'm up here having to watch the controls. I like to know if that happens to anybody else. I was with my friend down there, Don Heck, who I met on Facebook, and he asked me to come when I went to Las Vegas, visit where I had my timeshare. He asked me to come to Arizona, Kingman, Arizona, one of the best visits I've had. And I drove, when I flew into Vegas, I didn't go to my timeshare immediately. I rented a car and went to Kingman, Arizona, 100 miles south. And I stayed there 3 days. I was one of the best visits I've had in another state. I think that may have been better than it was when I went to my timeshare, because I was in my timeshare just mostly reading, and then had to cook, and then I had to go out and get the victuals and all that. But anyway, the point I'm making is that when I was there, I should have shown him what happens, because we were both doing our articles on Facebook. But I have learned to, when I have long articles, to type it first and then import it into Facebook. I should have asked him if he ever has had that experience. I'd like to know out there if you've had the experience where you're typing at a certain rate, and then the screen is going like this, and I'm modulating the slow pace of the letters going up on the screen, and it happens all the time. So so most of the time when I have some time, I will type the article, and then I will import it into Facebook by just cutting and pasting it and placing it on the network. But I don't always have the time to do that, and sometimes I go on and type it directly. That's when I noticed there's somebody in the background that has been hip to who George Moss is, and they are watching to see if they're gonna have to put me in jail again. I don't mean in physical jail, but in Facebook jail, where they silence you for a period of time, and that means you're not writing on the net for a period. And so that's the way that operates. I want to welcome back at this point. You know, a technician is so good about time. I want to welcome back WFOV, and they left for 4 minutes, and I tried to stay within the range of what we were when they left, so they're not having to cut and paste the program and find out what they missed, because you don't miss anything. I try to not to go ahead with the other parts of our program that you get back. What I really want to talk about, though, in terms of the other part of the program, is this continuing episode of impeachment, to clarify what really is going on here, because I find out that none of the I really don't think there are many constitutional scholars in the country. I have not seen any on television, and to call Alan Dershowitz a constitutional scholar is laughable. Dershowitz is not. See, I've been watching him on TV a lot more now, just paying attention to what he's saying. And I can say this without any equivocation. Alan Dershowitz is not a constitutional scholar. In fact, Dershowitz does not make constitutional arguments. He is making common sense arguments and claiming they are constitutional. You can see that in the things that happened this past week, where he got into there was a lot of controversy around what he said in front of the Senate, as he was in fact talking about the history of impeachment. Now Dershowitz is very good about talking about what others have said about it. But just because you can, in fact, parrot what others have said about the impeachment process does not mean that Dershowitz understands the process. And it took me a while. I was always bothered by what Dershowitz was saying, because I knew what he was saying was not true. But I couldn't put my finger on what the problem was. I mean, I knew the problem was what's coming out of his mouth. That was a problem, but I couldn't understand the nature of the problem, because if you really are a constitutional scholar, the things coming out of Dershowitz's mouth would not be coming out of his mouth. But what I really had to understand was what his expertise is. His expertise is not the Constitution. Dershowitz's expertise is he's able to tell people what others have said about, for example, impeachment. And he is very well able to do that. But when Dershowitz has to interpret what the document itself says, that's when he gets into a puddle of water, in fact, an ocean of water, in terms of what this man is actually saying. And every time he says, which he does this in every one of his interviews, is that this is not an impeachable offense, and that's not an impeachable offense, which actually drives me up a wall, because there's no such thing as an impeachable offense.
Did you happen to see another guy who's arguing for he was on Trump's group? His name is Jay Sekulow. You ever heard of him?
I know Jay Sekulow.
Yeah. See, I think he's far more impressive as a jurist, because he's argued, I think, won 12 cases in front of the Supreme Court. I don't think Dershowitz has done anywhere near that.
He hasn't done that many before the Supreme Court, because Dershowitz's case is basically, what Dershowitz is very good at is he puts the evidence on trial. Did you notice that during the hearing of the president, they didn't bring him in there to argue any of the legal claims? Dershowitz's job was to come and give a history of the claims made by others. He's able to parrot that back, because he's a parrot. Basically, he's a plagiarist.
But in this case, Dershowitz, it's basically like it goes down to any kind of legal time you actually look at a lawyer. I hate to say it this way, but lawyers can be considered like legal prostitutes. Basically, they'll make one argument one week and win a case in front of it, and then next week in another courtroom they're going to argue just opposite. Plato called them the sophists for a good reason, you know.
John said that they'll argue one point this week and argue another point next week. Dershowitz was called doing that. They said the 81-year-old Dershowitz was contradicted by the 61-year-old Dershowitz. And then, of course, Dershowitz wanted to blame Lawrence Tribe for that. Do you know he was blaming? John, did you see him blaming Lawrence Tribe?
No, I didn't see that. Well, did you know that Blackstone, though, the guy who wrote the famous book?
I know.
Do you know actually he wrote the definitive work on legal authority work on everything, and later on somebody actually used his own work later to argue against his current position. So lawyers are got ever shifting minds. And I guess that's a good thing. I mean, it's sometimes I've changed my mind on certain things over the years. And I think actually I did agree with one time what Bill Clinton said. He said sometimes if you have to have the moral integrity or the ability and the strength of character to say I was wrong about something and change your position. So I mean I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean a scholar does do that, but Dershowitz is making the claim that he has read more books. And that has grounded him into a different understanding that he had some years ago. That's admirable if you're saying that somebody wrote something and you looked at that as the principle, and then somebody wrote something else about the principle, and that was a better argument, and you changed based upon the better argument. That's one thing. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the Constitution of the United States. And the language that Dershowitz was pulling that's in 3 different parts of the Constitution, the impeachment language about the impeachment process, which is in Article 1, Section 2, and Article 1, Section 3, and then Article 2, Section 4. When you deal with that, that is unchanged. And you cannot say that you got a better understanding of that because you read somebody, because you can read the Constitution, and that understanding is the same as it was when you're making all those bogus claims, and making some bogus claims right now, saying that there are certain impeachable offenses. And this man has even said that the impeachment of Donald Trump was unconstitutional. You know, you really can't say things like that and be a constitutional scholar. Here is the Constitution saying that the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment. And Dershowitz is saying the exercise of the sole power of impeachment by the House is unconstitutional. You know, I want to jump through the screen and slap him. I'm not going to slap anybody. No, I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about any violence toward anyone. But it makes you just want to. What's that? It makes you want to scream. Was that Michael Jackson? It makes you want to scream. That makes you want to holler. Makes you want to holler. I guess that's the song. Makes you want to holler. Because. I mean, let's give them something to talk about. And it's not always about love. Let's talk about the Constitution. And that makes you want to give people something to talk about in Alan Dershowitz's case. And what we ought to be talking about is the Constitution. The framers did not specify what the particulars are about impeachment, because they were limited in terms of holding the president accountable in all areas in which the people who are responsible for holding the president in check through the check and balance system, it did not want to limit their possibilities by naming the processes through which you could in fact bring the person that's the president under control if in fact he goes out of control, and the check and balance system requires for the checks and balance to be put in place. It did not specify any particulars in that regard. And that's why they make the mistake saying impeachable offenses. There's no itemization of impeachable offenses in the Constitution. And if I'm wrong, and a lot of people say, well, you're wrong. Show me. I'm not wrong. They're wrong. And you can take that, and you can take that to the bank. I'm not wrong. There are no offenses named in the Constitution that would that would allow someone to say these are the impeachable offenses. That is not a claim made where the impeachment process is specified in the Constitution, which is in Article 1 of the Constitution. Why? Because impeachment takes place in the legislative body. In Alexander Hamilton, they were quoting it today on TV. I haven't heard anybody that understood what they were quoting, but they certainly know that the most relevant of the Federalist paper is 65, where Hamilton's writing about this. He writes about it in 65 and 66. It also mentions it in Federalist paper 69. But what Hamilton is talking about here, when he mentions, when they start talking about what Churchill was talking about is treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. That's not found in Article 1, it's found in Article 2. Article 1 talks about the impeachment process. Article 2, Section 4, is talking about the use of the process. And that's what Churchill does not understand. You see, the check and balance system is even found within the confines of the impeachment process. One part is given to the House of Representatives, the other component of it given to the Senate. They don't see that. There's check and balance system within the processes of the impeachment process that's delegated to the Congress in Article 1. Because the body that brings about impeachment is not the body that tries impeachment. And if they had understood that, they would not be arguing as they are right now, talking, and this is what these people are arguing. They're saying that if, this is what Chuck Schumer said, this is what this man is I don't even know how this ignorance can be allowed into, well, Congress is, that's our Congress. There's some real ignoramuses in that body. Their corruption is bad enough, but the ignorance even compounds their criminality, because they are criminals even without even trying to get away with anything, because they believe in some of the things they're saying. There has no credence in terms of what the constitutional claims are in a document that they have not read, and if they read it, they can't understand it. Chuck Schumer is saying if there was no witnesses and no documents allowed in the Senate, then the exoneration of the president, which will take place, by the way, Wednesday, there can be no exoneration. You know, these people don't have any respect for the Constitution when they say things like that. If there is no witnesses called in the Senate and no documents produced in the Senate, then you can't have a trial because of the absence of that. Look, folks, in Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6, it says, after having given the power of impeachment to the House, which is found in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, in Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6, it says, the Senate shall have the sole power to try the impeachment. So the impeachment takes place in the House of Representatives. The trial takes place in the Senate. So what's the Senate role here? The sole power of the Senate is to try the impeachment. So where is the impeachment taking place? It's taking place in the House, which has the sole power of impeachment. What that means, Alan Dershowitz and others, is that the House cannot do the Senate's job, and Chuck Schumer, the Senate cannot do the House's job. That's what it means. The Senate cannot call witnesses that were not called in the House. Now, what they could do is, in fact, call witnesses that were called by the House, because that would just be to clarify some of the testimony submitted to them based upon what the impeachment claim is, and they need further clarifications. They may bring him in, but you can't bring John Bolton in there. And when they start saying things like this, because they're doing hoodwinking in front of the American people, but you can't hoodwink me, because I understand the document better than they do, all of them. And that includes you, Lawrence Tribe, out there at Harvard University. That includes you, Alan Dershowitz, the professor emeritus at Harvard University that has a chair waiting for you if you ever go back. That chair is there waiting for you to sit in it, because no one can sit in that chair, because that's the respect they have for you and your legal jurisprudence. And I will not sit in that chair, because I respect the fact that that is of your 30 years of service at that university. I've not been at Harvard University, but I'm not intimidated by it. I have the same degrees that Dershowitz has. I admit I didn't get them from the same school, but apparently they were not lesser endowed, because the instruction they have is less than the instruction that I'm talking about. I'm not intimidated by these persons.
You know what's weird? If you go to colleges around the United States, and you go to the creme de la creme, like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, all that. You go look at the textbooks, and you're getting the same, even if you went to a much cheaper college,
right?
You're going to get largely the same kind of indoctrination.
Definitely.
And another thing is, I was going to bring this up. I don't know if you've ever heard of Jay. Like a Jay Sekulow. I was bringing him up earlier.
Okay.
If he had he's won and argued. I think argued 12 cases in front of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, 12 cases before the Supreme Court.
If he was Dershowitz, a secular lawyer, that one case would have made his career entirely. Mm-hmm. Very few people know of Jay Sekulow. You know that?
Yeah, that's true. I do. There are three lawyers that are really standing out in the defense of the president, and that stood down the House managers and made them look like the fools that they are. And that is Jay Sekulow. There's Pat Cipollone, and it's Filbert. What's Filbert's last name? Not that I'm even going to use his first name, as if I know him personally. But those lawyers, Filbert Northam, Pat Cipollone, and Jay Sekulow, those three persons, and I give Pam Bondi a certain amount of credit, the former Attorney General in the state of Florida. She stepped down from that post, and now she's on the team. Not that she stepped down to be on the team, but she is no longer serving in the capacity that she was serving in when she was a Florida representative. But she was on that team, also made some brilliant points. But those three attorneys that Donald Trump had made Hakeem Jeffries and Nadler, Nadler, who is over the House, get this now, he's over the House Intelligence Committee. They need to change that name. Look, until you get until you get another chairperson, that name needs to come down. House Intelligence Committee. You got Adam Schiff, the liar, and this man is a pathological liar. I mean, went to the Senate and started lying. I would think the man would have at least stopped lying once you came out of the House and you went to the Senate. He went over there and started lying. And they're sitting back there like Milt Romney and Susan Collins, Maine. Maine is one of two states, I think it's two states, that divide up their electoral vote based upon percentages. And so since the state went for Hillary Clinton, it only has 4 electoral votes. But Hillary got 3 of the votes, and Donald Trump got 1 in the 2016 election. So she's in that, what they call it's not a purple state, it's a blue state. these blue and red colors, by the way, are gang colors, and that's what that really that's what that is about. These are two gangs.
Notice now it's the red states are the people who are more constitutionally oriented are considered red because they know that terminology and those colors have been associated with the negative, the communist or red.
Yeah, right.
They switched them. They did that
John,
deliberately. They did that deliberately.
Yeah, John, you're right. If you're going to use red as a color and blue as a color, let's get those colors right. Even though we know what they're representative of, because red is not the color of the right. Red, when you say the Reds, you're not talking about conservatives. Red is the color for, when you say the Reds, you're talking about the communists.
Well, no,
Bernie Sanders is red.
Another thing is too, if you look at the terms left and right. Years ago, that used to designate, I think it was the King of France, the people who are loyal to the king would sit on the right side of him, the people who are challenging him are on the left. Well, guess what? They're royalist, the right people on the right. I've never met too many conservatives who are actually for kingship or ultimate rule by the state. Right. That's on the left.
Yeah, it
that's
is on the left.
Solidly on the left.
John, that's why, and people are surprised when you say this to them, that's why the revolution that we had in this country was a conservative revolution. The revolution they had in France was a liberal revolution. Robespierre and all of those persons, and Robespierre, and how they turned on him, by the way, because Robespierre, who really was one of the instigators of the French Revolution in the latter part of the 1780s, really going into the 1790s, they eventually turned on Robespierre because that's what the left does. It eats its own. It eats its own, and Robespierre lost his head during that revolution. But in the American Revolution, once the revolution was over and King George III had understood this thing was over, and he had to back off and sign the Treaty of Paris in 1783, after that 7-year war was fought between 1776 and 1783, when the framers picked up the armaments and pushed them off their rights, which made them, by the way, put in the Constitution, the Second Amendment, so that the people could push the government back off their rights if the need comes to do so. And that's why it's positioned in the Constitution, where it is as far as the Second Amendment is concerned, behind the statement of the rights people have that they're born with and so on and so forth. So the Second Amendment gives the people the right to bear arms, but it's placed there for a reason, and that is because the revolution was one in which they had fought for their rights, but they had something that stood behind what they were claiming were their rights, inalienable rights, and they stood behind those rights with their arms. And that's what they gave the people in this country the right to bear arms, because if your rights are not backed up by government, with government is not backed up by arms, you don't have those rights. And they were very, very clear about that. But the thing about the American Revolution, which was a conservative revolution, was that once the Revolution War was over, there was no retribution. These were conservatives. And they said, well, they're fighting a revolution. Yes, but you're fighting a revolution to conserve the rights that Thomas Jefferson was writing about in the Declaration of Independence. Inalienable rights. They were trying to conserve the rights that were inalienable rights, the rights that people are born with, not rights that are handed to you by some benevolence of the government. Because, and listen to me very close here, there are no benevolent governments on the planet, and never have been. Because governments have always been run, and will always be run by different versions of Attila. And that's the point Ayn Rand is making in her book called The New Intellectuals. And that's the point that she makes in the first chapter of the book. You can't miss it. In the first, the first 45 pages of that book. If you can get through the first 45 pages, you got pretty much the grounding points of everything that she is sharing with the readers in that book, because a lot of it is other books that she wrote. She's repeating some of the things found, for example, in her classic, Atlas Shrugged, which is really the classic that she wrote. And you really can't beat the things she said in that book. A lot of it is reminiscing of some of the writings from other writers. But in the first 45 pages of Ayn Rand's book called The New Intellectuals, you'll see that she's talking about the brilliance of these framers. And she says this, and I agree with her on this point here as well, and that is that the framers were this country's first intellectuals, and so far is last. And Ayn Rand died in 1982. She made a transition in 1982, was born in 1905, and at the age of 77 made a transition. She said that before her passage, but 38 years now on the other side of her passing, her comment still stands. The framers were this country's first intellectuals, and they also the last intellectuals. You know, you can claim scholars now, Dertcher and some of the others, because they attack the body of information, so they are scholars. But in terms of thinking outside the box, that would be the intellectuals, and that's what the framers were. They were people that were, in fact, standing outside of the box, creating something new, coming out of their own ability to think. And we have not produced anyone since that time on that level. Okay, John, tell me we have to get out of here. I want to always tell you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you will never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.